Hey, superstars, welcome back to yet another awesome high vibe episode of Word Up with Danny Katz. Today, I am joined by the author of The Gene Keys and the Art of Contemplation and the forthcoming book of Lines, which those of us Gene Keys nerds have been waiting for such a long time, Mr. Richard Rudd. And God bless Richard for for this conversation and so many conversations we've had that aren't always the easiest. Before we dive in, I am reminding you to click that subscribe button, to like, to share, to comment. I'm also going to encourage you to sign up for my newsletter because I hear so consistently that people, even though they're subscribed, I don't necessarily show up in their feed. And when you sign up for my newsletter, you absolutely get to stay on top of my every next video drop, podcast drop, book launch. My new book is out, The Language of Betterarchy. It's just a great way for us to really, truly keep in touch. I think that does it for housekeeping. Buckle up and prepare to enjoy my conversation with the ever graceful, gracious, beautiful, brilliant Richard Rudd. You're writing the line book finally that we've all been waiting for so long. Thank you for doing that.
It's quite a job. Yeah, it's quite a task. Yeah, it's going to be ready for at least a year, if not more, because it's so much. It's depth.
Right. Is that daunting for you? Like, do you come up against resistance before diving into a book?
No, I love it. I love it. And this book, it's just been a magical book because since when my father died 2 years ago, I decided to start writing it. I knew I was going to write it later in my life because it's called The Sage, so I thought I can't write that book until I'm like at least mid-50s. So I started it, and then my father died, and then that was the trigger. I'm going to start writing it. And so all I did for about a year and a half was I wrote one sutra every morning at dawn for each of the lines. I didn't know what the line was actually when I wrote each sutra, so I just wrote the sutra, like 4-line little piece of poetry or a kind of wisdom that would come to me, and then afterwards I would go, I wonder what line that is, and then I would just tune in and until I kind of got the quality of the line. And so I did that for a year and a half without anything else. But prior to that, I had gone through a process of naming the lines, but I didn't tell anyone the names. And the names are changing a bit anyway, because I'm writing the book, so things are kind of jumping about a bit. And, that's part of the magic of writing a book, isn't it? You know that.
Absolutely.
Start with one idea, it turns into all kinds of other things.
Yeah. Are you familiar with the writer Douglas? I think it was Douglas Rushkoff, David Rushkoff.
David Rushkoff. That rings a bell.
He was a satirist. He died maybe a decade ago, a brilliant, beautiful writer. And I remember hearing an interview with him where he said the hardest part about writing a book is how much it sucks until it doesn't, and how the first draft sucks and you just have to keep going, and it's terrible, and things are in the wrong place and the ideas are only like half baked, and you just have to get comfortable with it not being good until you get to the place where then you can make it good.
Yeah. It's a lot of orchestration. I mean, Rick and I were talking about this actually, and we were saying that when you write, like I think he and I write books in a similar way. Like I don't really have a plan. And we were saying, so that's quite alien to us, like to me, like I don't have a plan. I have the kind of structure, and I think I'm just going to fill the structure in randomly and see what grows from, so I have the structure of like the Gene Keys when I wrote that, 64 of them. And I thought, okay, there's 64 things or chapters, and I wrote them randomly, and then it kind of all assembled itself, and then one chapter affects another one, and then you kind of, something else pushes another one out or changes one. And yeah, it's just a magical experience. This lines one is especially magical because it's very intricate. It's just 384 of them.
Right, because
Yeah.
they change for each sphere and
Yeah,
place.
and I'm finding families as well appearing that have no they have no kind of logic, but there are little families of lines that just have a resonance, but they're not the same, like they're not the same numbers. But it's just, so it's quite magical. It's quite enchanting.
This is the one I've been waiting for a really long time. So on a personal, selfish level, I'm very excited and grateful that you're doing this.
Yeah. Well, I hope it will live up to your expectations. It's not a sort of, it's more of a poetic kind of deep, very contemplative work. It'll be, yeah.
Right. And is it also your birthday season?
It is now, yeah. It
Happy
is.
birthday season.
Thank you. When's yours?
Mine's January. I'm
Oh, of
deep
course.
winter
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah. Are you an Aquarian?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the new ones.
Very Aquarian.
Yeah.
So I have a few places where I'd love for us to be able to play today. I had the privilege. This must be my lucky week because I was able to interview another one of my dear respected teachers this week, and we were talking about being put on a pedestal, which is something you and I have been talking about. And I'm curious, as the Gene Keys has grown and continues to grow, like, do you have any strategies in place to help keep yourself in check or help other people, like not put you on a pedestal? Or is that even in your sphere of awareness?
Yeah. My strategy is called my wife and my kids.
Uh-huh. That was
Who,
his strategy too.
yeah, yeah. It's a real grounding thing, that, like the moment I walked through the door coming back from Italy recently, and I was kind of in a really nice, very creative space. And then I came in, and the first thing my wife said after saying hello was, "The dog's got meat all over his chops. Can you go and wipe it off?" So I was like, but it's little things like that. Yeah, those things, families keep you very grounded, if you're a family person. And also I think, my family are not that into Gene Keys particularly. So because they've all got their own destinies, and so they respect it, I think, but they don't even get too involved in it. And so I think that's one thing. But I think life also kind of sends you warnings when, what's your word for it? Pedestalizing.
Well, it's actually your friend Blue's word. She calls it
Is it
pedestaling.
pedestaling? Yeah, I mean, it's common. It's a thing, we all do it. I do it. I put people on pedestals. The safe thing is if you want to put someone on a pedestal, make sure they're dead. Because then they can't fall off, hopefully. But yeah, so I don't come that much. I mean, it's not too much of a problem for me. It does happen. I feel it happen occasionally, and part of me quite enjoys it. The ego part of me quite enjoys it, but not in a way of, just in the kind of, it makes me smile because I know I know it's nonsense, and so I kind of I try and help people feel comfortable. If I meet them face to face, I just let them know I'm just ordinary. I'm really not that impressive. So, but I also, woven into the Gene Keys teachings is a message of, this is the changing time, really, of for all of us in consciousness, isn't it? It's the time where we have to be the master ourselves, or the teacher, and find that, and all give each other a lift if possible. But there always are people who are just, who really deserve to be put on a pedestal.
Like who?
Well, I don't know. So you take someone like Nelson Mandela or something who really has just like lived through it and just iconic people, and who kind of have earned it. I don't know that I've earned it. I haven't. So that's why I kind of laugh a bit, and I can get hooked by it. I can get hooked occasionally by the glamour sometimes. I get, there'll be traps, but then I have good people around me that give me warnings. Yeah, I think it's good learning for everyone. And I have had a few occasions where I've been put on a pedestal and then experienced myself falling off that pedestal, and watching a person go through a whole process with it. It's like, where I was there and then I disappointed them, and then there was a whole thing, and then in some cases they actually came the whole way through and then thanked me at the end for just being that symbol, so that they could go through that whole process of the expectation, adoration, whatever it is, disappointment, and then forgiveness, and then normal flat plane relationship. So that's, it's quite incredible.
As I hear you say that, it feels like that's the highest teaching a teacher could give to a student who was pedestaling him or her, is to be a facilitator for that process, or be a reflection that kicks that process into action, and to also be there when they come out the other end. That feels very pragmatic.
I think so. Yeah, because our job, if you're in a kind of authority role, whatever level, you want to, if you're a teacher or a teacher at a school or something, you're going to get some people's projections, good and bad, and they're going to go through processes, and you have to sort of handle that and not take it personally, and sometimes you might, and just be there for them. That's really, be there for that. With the work I'm doing, I'm here for people at a very deep level, at a soul level. So yeah, I think that it can be useful for people. Yeah. And sometimes I think it can be very healing. I experience a lot of younger people who had shit dads, for example, and they've used me or other people like me as ways of healing some of that wound, inside themselves, just by projecting that onto me, or kind of, oh God, there's someone I can rely on, as who's gentle or caring or whatever, and they never had that. So I think it can be useful. It can be healing for people as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's got dangers, yeah, for sure. I don't know how those people do it who are on the circuit. Like, there are people who are just on the circuit, and they are teaching, traveling, making hundreds of thousands of dollars, and just having loads of adoration and really famous. That is like, that's something that must be hard to kind of handle. I don't know what that's like, but I see it in certain famous people that I've met. It's difficult for them. Yeah.
It seems difficult. I grew up in Los Angeles, so fame was everywhere.
Yeah.
And what I learned from that is like fame, it creates a different species, because there's so many walls up. Yeah. And even if we think they're not, it's like, it's just a completely different, and so much projection. And then when you go to super celebrities, where you have millions and billions of people projecting onto them, that just seems like a bizarre earthwalk to choose.
Yeah. In some cases they didn't choose it. It just happened, and then there they are, and they have to deal with it. And it can be kind of lonely, I think. It can be painful.
It seems very painful.
Yeah. Yeah, and quite often, some of those super celebrities, their friends are the people that work for them, and the family, and maybe there might be one or two others, but yeah, it's quite a thing.
Yeah, I mentioned to you, I don't remember if it was by email, but that I just read this book by Justine Bateman called Fame. And it was a very, very intelligent examination of the life cycle of fame and what it's like to be famous and not famous. And it was really interesting and humanizing. Really,
Was it?
because I've noticed when I'm around famous people, sometimes I can like spaz out, right? And afterwards, I'm like, why am I acting so weird? Why is my heart beating fast? This is just a human being. So she kind of touches on that as well, like these just kind of walking projection fields.
Mm, yeah, yeah, it's true. And that it I think you want to be careful if you're in any situation like that, where because you can end up being very defensive, and then but I mean, I understand it's difficult, but then you lose touch with the just ordinariness,
Yeah,
ordinary people. That must be really difficult.
must be so difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I appreciate your bringing up the ordinary because I've been studying Hapkido for the past year, and my teacher's always talking about the ordinary, the small, very Taoist. He talks about
Mm,
the Tao all the time.
mm. Yeah, it's sort of something I've fallen more and more in love with in the recent years, of just the ordinariness of existence. And yeah, I'm a lover of tea, drinking tea, like fine Chinese teas, and that for me just is a symbol. Like anything can be that symbol for just the ordinariness of like sitting down and pouring really well some cups of tea and drinking with a friend, or even drinking alone in a contemplative way, but with awareness. It's just, there's nothing more ordinary than just sitting having a cup of tea, to me anyway.
Yeah. And I feel like it's the presence that we bring to it that makes it
Yeah,
special,
yeah,
ritual.
it can be really extraordinary.
Yeah.
And in fact, with Rick, I served him tea, and he wanted me to serve him tea and then do it in the podcast. So we did it in the podcast, and so we, because it's powerful. Something that ordinary is actually quite powerful. So yeah, because you
Well,
keep going deeper.
yeah. And I know that some of the tea you drink is my friend Colin's tea. And to hear Colin talk about, the wisdom of the leaves, that are gifted, from the tree itself, I'm not doing it justice, but it just brings this awareness of how special tea actually is, even though it's this very ordinary act.
It is, and it just because it, like anything, it can connect us to nature. Anything that you imbibe, especially a leaf or a flower or plant, and then you imbibe it, it just connects us deeply into our source and our roots, and this is where we come from. This is the earth we're drinking or eating. Those are really great ways of connecting with our roots and with our ordinariness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've stepped into the Dream Arc initiation retreat. I'm already in love with the field. It's so magical. And I'm also noticing some changes presenting themselves in the structure. And I was curious about your take on censorship and language policing in through the lens of the 55th gene key. And the idea of sacrificing freedom to protect victim consciousness. I'd love to know your take on that.
Well, I think I know what you're talking about. I think one of the things that Rosie and I've tried to do is because the Dream Arc is new, and it's designed so that it can be available to anyone, and that includes people that are completely new to my teachings or the gene keys or any of those things. We just want to keep reminding people of that, because the people that, when you get into a realm like gene keys or human design or astrology or whatever, you learn the language, you love the language, you get absorbed in it, and you can forget very easily just how alienating it can feel to someone that doesn't know that. Like, it's like being at a party and there's a group of people that know each other and they speak a kind of language and you don't speak that language. How do you get in? And so we just wanted to create that way of just reminders. But I can understand it's a touchy subject because, and we each of us as an individual has to be aware of our kind of tendency towards rebellious reaction. So if we feel or if we project that someone's trying to control us, we might react, and we might overreact. And I don't know. All I know is that Rosie, who's kind of often says those things, is one of the most empathic people I know. And I don't know any other way of saying it without not saying it. Either we could not say it, in which case people might not be aware. So it's nice I agree, it's something to learn from for all of us. It's like one of those things that, like cultural appropriation, it's a journey and we have to learn from it. And this is a journey as well. We're trying to increase the feeling of empathy so that no one feels left out. But we certainly don't want to go in a direction of censorship. That would be utterly against would be against any principle that any of us represent. This is about as far away from who we are or who anyone into the Gene Keys or Dream Arc is, so because it's like super inclusive. But at the same time, I think those are good messages. It's like one of the things we've had to really address, it's a silly thing you might think, is some people don't like to put their camera on in the Zoom rooms, right? And other people found that really difficult, because they think, well, what have you got to hide? Why are you here if you can't show yourself? And there's lots of people that kind of actually, they might have they're neurodiverse, or they have like something going on that makes the visual very overwhelming for them. And so we've really listened, and we came up with it. We actually took advice, and we came up with the idea through a friend of ours to have an audio only room, so that people who want to do that actually feel safe in there. And we want others to include like that's okay but we'd like the people, if you are going to choose to do that, we'd quite like it if you could say, you don't have to explain why, but you could say, I am here, but you might say a few words in your own, what your reasoning is, so that you don't have to give it an excuse. You just have to say, presence it and say, I'm here, I'm 100% here. I just want you to know. And so it's things like that where like, there's so many of these, how do you inclusiveness is something to continually expand. It's a lesson that I'm always learning, that our group are learning, our business is learning, and our values are to be super inclusive. So that's really all I'd say, is that's what we're attempting to do, be as inclusive as possible. And every time we get a piece of feedback like yours, we'll tailor it as even more if we can, because we certainly don't want people feeling like they're being censored. That would be awful. So we might, we had a conversation about it recently. So should we have rooms for people to discuss? I said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to segregate too much. But maybe we will. Maybe we'll have like rooms where it's more about people who speak certain languages and want to carry on speaking that language. Then that's an interest group. So we just welcome people who have interest groups like that, wherever it is, if it's Gene Keys or anything, like go on to form your own groups, form your own groups, self-organize. And it doesn't mean you can't share it in our retreats, of course, the Dream Arc retreat, because it's a different language. But maybe I think that's what Rosie was saying, and that's what I would say always and have said, is if you say something that someone else might not understand, just qualify what it is. I mean, that's easy. You just, so if I say, because I've had people in rooms with me in chat rooms or whatever, or Zoom rooms, and they say I'm a 2-4 projector from human design on the cross of this or that, and they say some language and I don't know what it means. I know what that means, but there's some things I don't know what it means. And I'd be like, well, I didn't understand what you said, by the way. And they're like, oh, sorry. So it's just nice sometimes to kind of preempt these things and think. So that's really all we're trying to do, is like just qualify. If you're, I've got gene key 56 line 6 in my SQ. Oh, does everyone here know what gene keys is? Oh yeah, cool. And oh, you don't? Okay, well that's just like, you might say a few words like just to help them feel included. So it's literally just that. It's
interesting because I know it's so well intended and I know it's so loving, and the more efforts go into inclusivity in the gene keys, the more excluded and oppressed I personally feel. And I'm looking at that because I'm working with the Raven, and that is, the shadow of oppression. But I love how self-responsible the community is, right? So if I go to a party and everyone knows themselves and I don't, I can victimize myself and think that they're doing something wrong, or I can take responsibility for how I'm feeling and use that as an opportunity to extend myself, learn more tools. So I notice in this larger inclusivity conversation, there's less and less opportunities for people to do that because we're attempting to sanitize this space, which is also a lot of complication, which we know is a shadow. Simplification being a city. And I notice like the preambles for the rules for all these calls are getting longer, no profanity. Don't talk about astrology, don't talk about this. And it's like, it feels like we're protecting a victim frequency instead of trusting that, like, if I don't understand what people are talking about, I can say, you know what, I didn't understand that. But all these rules, like, where's there room for the trickster if we're not allowed to swear? And if someone gets triggered, great, let's bring that into the conversation as adults and talk about it. But all of that is rules. It's just, I'm having a hard time with it.